The sky above Nexus 7 was the color of rusted metal, a permanent twilight smeared with the fumes of dying machines. Wind howled across the planet's surface, dragging with it the stink of ozone and corrosion. Jared Harlow trudged through the scrapyard wasteland, boots crunching over shards of alloy and fused glass, the acrid air burning his lungs. He had once been a man who fixed things, ships, engines, maybe even people, but the universe had laughed in his face one too many times. Debt, bad deals, and one catastrophic failure had driven him from civilized space to this forgotten graveyard of technology. Now he worked 12-hour shifts for a pittance, scavenging among the wrecks of wars no one remembered. The horizon glowed faintly orange through the toxic haze, and somewhere far off, a derelict freighter moaned as the wind hollowed through its ruptured hull. He told himself the sound was mechanical, but the planet had a way of making metal sound like pain. Today was no different, except that beneath his habitual despair there was a dull rhythm of survival. One foot, then the other. Keep moving, keep breathing, keep pretending you still mattered to someone, somewhere. His shovel struck something with a dull metallic thud. He paused, expecting another empty fuel casing or crushed hull plate. But the vibration that came back up the shaft of the tool felt wrong, hollow, too soft, like striking a drum covered in fabric. Jared frowned and knelt, brushing away layers of powdery orange dust. The ground shifted under his weight, a treacherous surface of compacted debris ready to swallow the unwary. When the dust cleared, he saw a glint something smooth beneath the grit. He dug faster, the motions automatic, sweat stinging his eyes. Then came the sound. A noise so faint, he thought at first it was the wind whistling through fractured panels. But no, there it was again. A moan. Thin, breathy, human in cadence, but not in tone. His pulse quickened. "Hello?" He called out, voice muffled by his respirator mask. Nothing. Then another moan, closer. He dropped the shovel, clawing at the debris with his hands. His gloves shredded against jagged metal, but he barely felt the pain. The harder he dug, the more the shape beneath took form an arm, impossibly slender, dusted blue beneath the grime. Then a shoulder, a face. He froze. It wasn't a corpse. The eyes flickered open, pale as glacier glass, unfocused and terrified. The being beneath the rubble gasped, her lips parting around a strangled sound. She wasn't human, not even close, but the panic in her expression was universal. Jared scraped the last layer of scrap away, his breath coming hard. The girl, she couldn't be more than 16 in human terms, was trembling violently. Her skin shimmered faintly under the dim light, a translucent blue that caught every glint of the junk field around her. Her silver-white hair was matted with grease and dirt, a tangle of threads clinging to her cracked lips. Hey, it's okay," Jared said, his voice shaking as he pulled away more debris. She tried to sit up, then panicked, grabbing his sleeve and pointing frantically to her throat. He saw it then, the edges of a fabric cord digging into the tender skin just below her collarbone, buried halfway under compacted dust. This wasn't an accident. Someone had forced her into this grave. Fury and disbelief collided in his chest. He yanked the cord free and scooped her up, her body weightless, shockingly cold against his warmth. She shivered, eyes darting to the hole she'd been trapped in, mouthing words he didn't understand high, musical sounds that broke into sobs. "Don't worry," he murmured. "You're safe now." But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. Nothing on Nexus 7 was ever safe. The wind howled louder, carrying with it the clang of distant machinery. Jared looked down at the trembling alien girl in his arms. Her heart beat faint against his chest, and something old and buried within him stirred. He could have walked away, called the foreman, reported the biohazard, and collected a finder's fee. Instead, he tightened his grip and turned toward the distant glow of the settlement. For the first time in years, he wasn't running from trouble. He was running toward it. Jared stumbled through the settlement's narrow alleys as the night cycle descended, bringing with it the flicker of malfunctioning lights and the metallic taste of recycled air. The girl's breathing was shallow against his chest, each inhale a fragile whisper. He passed rows of prefab shelters, built from scavenged halls, their walls trembling with the pulse of cheap generators. The few residents still awake gave him quick, wary glances, but didn't interfere on Nexus 7. Curiosity got you killed faster than kindness. His quarters were little more than a box welded from scrap. One bed, a cracked water unit, and a heating coil that coughed more than it warmed. He set her down carefully, brushing grime from her face. Under the dust she was otherworldly skin like soft ice, veins faintly luminescent beneath the surface, lips a shade between silver and blue. She blinked up at him, dazed but conscious, her gaze darting to every corner of the tiny room. When he offered her water, she snatched the cup and drank with desperate gulps, spilling half of it down her chin. Jared couldn't look away. She was alive. Not just breathing, but alive with a kind of fierce fragility that made his chest ache. He hadn't felt anything like that in years. "Slow down," he said, taking the cup gently from her trembling hands. "You'll make yourself sick." She watched him warily, trying to form words. Her voice, when it came, was a soft sequence of musical syllables that hung in the air like chimes. He shook his head helplessly. "I don't understand." Her brow furrowed in frustration. After a moment she pointed to herself, tapping her chest. "Tula," she said slowly. He nodded. "Tula, okay, I'm Jared." He mirrored the gesture, thumping his chest. She hesitated, then repeated, "Jared." Hearing her say his name with that alien accent did something strange to him, like a spark flickering in a long-dead circuit. He smiled despite himself. She seemed to relax a little at the expression. He rummaged through a drawer and produced a clean shirt, holding it out. "Your clothes are ruined. Here, take this." She tilted her head, studying him, and accepted the offering. Without hesitation she began to peel away the shredded remains of her dress, and Jared spun around so fast he nearly tripped. "Whoa, hold on. I'll, give you a second." He stared at the wall, counting the dents in the metal until he heard a quiet voice behind him. "Done." When he turned, she was wearing his shirt, the hem falling to her knees, her damp hair curling over her shoulders. She looked impossibly young and impossibly far from home. He knelt beside her, gesturing toward the small light panel on his datapad. "Can you draw? Show me?" She hesitated, then took it in both hands. Her slender fingers danced over the screen, sketching 3 figures with the same pointed ears she possessed. 2 taller, broader, 1 smaller. She drew a line connecting them, then slashed through her own image and scrawled jagged marks around the others. Jared frowned, trying to piece it together. "Family?" He guessed. She nodded. "Brothers?" Another nod. Then she drew a crown over all 3 and stacks of coins beside them. "Royal?" He tried. Her eyes darkened, and she mimed a cutting motion across her throat. Understanding hit like a hammer. "They tried to kill you." She looked away, jaw trembling, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. Jared exhaled slowly. He'd seen plenty of cruelty in his time syndicates that bled whole worlds dry, slavers who traded lives for oxygen. But something about this girl, being buried alive by her own blood, turned his stomach. "You're safe here," he said quietly, though the words felt thin and uncertain. She looked up at him, eyes wide, as if searching for truth in his face. A faint tremor shook the walls. A cargo hauler roaring past outside. She flinched at the sound, clutching his sleeve. "Easy," he murmured. "Just machinery." But then he noticed the shadows shifting beyond the window, two figures moving with purpose, scanning each doorway with handheld trackers. His pulse spiked. They weren't workers. He recognized the precision in their movements, the methodical sweep of professionals. Whoever had buried her hadn't given up. Tula saw them too. Her breath hitched. She pointed frantically to the window, then to the door, whispering something urgent in her language. "I see them," Jared whispered. He killed the lights, pulling her away from the window. "We can't stay here." For a moment they crouched in the dark, listening to the hum of the settlement and the distant wind keening through the scrap towers. Tula's hand found his in the shadows, small and cold but unshaking. "Please," she said in halting standard, the single word clear, desperate, and utterly human. Something inside Jared hardened, a resolve he hadn't felt since the days before he'd lost everything. He squeezed her hand once, steady. "I won't let them find you," he said. "We're getting out of here." Outside, the two hunters moved closer, their scanners pulsing faint light across the corridor walls. Inside, Jared packed a small satchel with water, tools, and his old service knife. The girl watched every motion, silent but alert, like someone who'd already learned the cost of trust. As he slung the pack over his shoulder and cracked the door, the faint electric storm above the settlement flashed across her face, turning her eyes into twin shards of frozen lightning. In that moment, Jared realized he'd crossed a line he could never uncross. He wasn't just saving a stranger. He was taking on the universe itself. The wind outside bit like acid as Jared slipped into the shadows. Tula closed behind him. The settlement had entered its night cycle streets dim, generators humming like restless animals, but danger never slept on Nexus 7. He kept low, his eyes adjusting to the murky light reflected off mountains of scrap metal and rust-colored sand. Tula moved with an eerie grace for someone who'd nearly died, her bare feet silent on the debris. She had pulled his jacket tight around her thin frame, the hood casting her face in shadow. Behind them, distant voices murmured in the alien tongue of the hunters. Jared didn't have to understand the words to know what they meant. Find her. His pulse thudded in his ears as he led her down a maintenance corridor lined with cracked conduits and leaking pipes. "Stay close," he whispered. "If we're lucky, they'll sweep east first." "Lucky," she echoed softly, tasting the word like something foreign. He managed a grim smile. "You'll learn. Humans believe in luck when nothing else works." She frowned, puzzled but trusting him enough to follow. The corridor ended in a ladder leading up to the waste tunnels that ringed the settlement. Jared pried open the hatch, and the stench of rot and chemicals hit them both. "Sorry," he muttered. "Not the cleanest way out." She shook her head. "Not matter. Safe." The conviction in her broken speech startled him. He climbed first, then helped her up, their hands briefly clasping in the darkness. The contact sent a jolt through him, warmth meeting her cool skin, and for a heartbeat, the world outside the tunnel didn't exist. Then a distant metallic shriek reminded him it did. They crawled through the narrow shaft, the sound of dripping sludge echoing around them. Somewhere above, a patrol drone buzzed past, its scanner beam slicing through the cracks in the ceiling. Jared froze, pressing a finger to his lips. Tula mirrored him perfectly quiet, still, eyes glowing faintly in the gloom like twin stars. When the sound faded, he exhaled. "You learn fast," he whispered. She tilted her head. "You teach fast." He wanted to laugh, but couldn't risk the noise. 10 minutes later, they emerged outside the perimeter fence, the settlement's glow fading behind them. Ahead stretched the junk field's endless dunes of twisted wreckage and half-buried starship carcasses. The wind moaned through their hollow frames, sounding almost alive. Jared adjusted his pack and scanned the horizon. "There," he said, pointing to the outline of a ruined facility in the distance. "Old processing plant. Abandoned. We can hide there till dawn." Tula nodded, but hesitated, staring back toward the lights of the settlement. "Home?" she murmured. "No," Jared said quietly. "That's just where I sleep." They started walking. The ground crunched beneath them, and each gust of wind carried particles of dust that glimmered like dying embers. Halfway to the facility, a voice rasped out from the darkness. "Harlow." Jared spun, knife in hand. A tall, four-eyed figure stepped from behind a rusted container, lantern in one hand, plasma wrench in the other. Krell, the old Dravenian mechanic, his leathery skin glistening in the gloom. "You're either desperate or stupid, human." "Probably both." Relief and dread warred in Jared's chest. "Krell, thank the void. I need help." The old alien's lower eyes narrowed as his upper pair focused on Tula. "And what exactly have you dragged into my sector?" Tula instinctively moved closer to Jared, her fingers clutching his sleeve. "Someone in trouble," Jared said. "She's being hunted." Krell grunted, unimpressed. "Aren't we all?" But when his secondary eyes caught the shimmer of Tula's hair, his posture changed. "By the molten rings? Tyrusian?" Tula flinched at the word. "House crest's missing, but that skin tone, those eyes, there's no mistaking it." He studied her for a moment longer, then sighed. "Follow me before the wind flays us alive." They followed him through a maze of half-collapsed containers to a hidden workshop buried beneath layers of junk. Inside, the air smelled of machine oil and something sweet Dravenian incense. Tools hung from the ceiling in organized chaos. "You picked a dangerous pet, Harlow," Krell said, activating a field jammer that bathed the room in a soft hum. "The whole sector's buzzing with talk of a royal bounty." Jared's stomach tightened. "They've already sent hunters." "Void hounds," Krell confirmed, his voice low. "Ex-military. Efficient. Expensive." He turned to Tula, addressing her directly. "Your kind never comes this far into the rim, unless something's gone very wrong." Tula hesitated, then pressed a hand to her chest. "Tula," she said. "Father. Rich. Brothers." She faltered, struggling for words, then drew a line across her throat. Krell grunted. "Classic Tyrusian solution to inheritance disputes. The Ascension Claw's last heir standing inherits all. They buried you to make certain of it." Jared swore softly. "You knew about this?" "Everyone knows," Krell said bitterly. "Worked for her house once, before they ruined me too." Silence fell, thick and heavy. Outside, thunder rumbled across the plains. Tula looked between them, eyes wide with fear and guilt. Jared crouched beside her. "We'll figure something out," he said. "You're safe here." She shook her head. "No safe. Hunters come." Krell's upper eyes blinked in agreement. "She's right. They'll track her heat signature, jammer or not. But I might have a way off this rock." Jared looked up sharply. "How?" Krell gestured to a flickering map on his console. "A supply freighter docks tomorrow. If we can reach it, I can forge you passage codes." "And credits?" Jared asked. "You'll need them." "We'll think of something," Jared said, though he had no idea what. Tula's hand brushed his arm, her voice trembling but steady. "You help me. I help you." He met her gaze, and for the first time in years, saw purpose reflected back at him. Krell snorted. "You two are either the galaxy's luckiest fools or its next corpses. Either way, it'll be entertaining." The wind howled against the metal walls, a reminder that dawn would bring more than light. It would bring the void hounds. And Jared Harlow, A man who'd run from everything was about to discover what it meant to fight for someone else's life. The storm rolled across the junk fields, like a living thing, a serpent of dust and static that rattled the walls of Krell's workshop. Inside, the dim glow of salvaged lamps cast long shadows across the cluttered benches and rusted equipment. Jared sat hunched on a crate, his hands wrapped around a steaming mug of synthetic coffee that tasted faintly of metal. Across from him, Tula examined a tangle of wires with careful curiosity, her silver hair catching the flicker of light each time she moved. Krell worked silently at a terminal nearby, his 4 eyes flicking between screens filled with encrypted data and half-functioning scanners. The hum of the field jammer filled the air like an artificial heartbeat. For the first time since he'd found her buried in the dirt, there was quite a fragile, temporary peace that neither of them fully trusted. "You shouldn't have brought her here," Krell muttered without turning. "If the Void Hounds catch your scent, they'll torch this whole sector to slag." Jared glanced toward Tula, who now traced her fingers along the cool surface of a dismantled reactor core. "You think I should have left her to die out there?" Krell snorted. "I think you did what humans always do, lead with the heart, pay with the blood." Jared took a sip from his cup, the bitter liquid grounding him. "Maybe, but she's still alive. That counts for something." Tula turned at the sound of their voices. "You fight?" she asked softly, her standard halting but improving with each hour. Jared smiled faintly. "Sometimes, when I have to." She nodded, understanding flickering across her alien features. "I fight too, before." She stopped, her gaze dropping to the floor. Jared wanted to ask what before meant, but the look in her eyes, old pain behind youth, made him stay silent. Instead, he pulled a small metal sphere from his pocket, no larger than a fist. "Ever seen one of these?" he asked. She shook her head. "Old Earth tech," he explained, pressing a switch. The sphere unfolded, projecting a faint hologram of a starfield speckled with green markers. "Used for charting. I used to dream about seeing all this traveling, fixing ships, building things that mattered." The image shimmered in the dusty air. "Then I blew it. Wrong job, wrong people. Lost everything." He snapped it shut again, the light vanishing. "Now I just fix junk and try not to get noticed." "You found me," Tula said, as if that canceled every failure. He blinked, unsure how to respond. "Yeah," he said finally, voice rough. "Guess I did." She smiled small, uncertain, but real, and something in his chest loosened. Across the room, Krell watched them, his upper eyes narrowing. "Careful, human," he said quietly. "That one's the center of a political war. You start caring too much, you'll end up buried next to her." Jared met his gaze without flinching. "Maybe, but at least I'd go down for the right reason." Krell grumbled something in his native language and returned to his console. Hours passed. The storm outside softened to a low hiss, and exhaustion crept in. Jared stretched out on a cot Krell had cleared, while Tula lay on a narrow bench nearby, wrapped in one of his spare blankets. The room smelled faintly of ozone and machine oil. For a while, only the low hum of the generator filled the silence. Then, in the dark, her voice came soft, hesitant. "On my world," she said, "we are taught to hide feelings. Control is strength. Passion is sickness." Jared turned his head toward her, the dim light catching her pale profile. "That's a lonely way to live." She nodded. "My brothers believed love made me weak. They said I shamed our name." Her voice cracked, and she fell silent. Jared sat up slowly, moved by an instinct older than fear. "They were wrong," he said. "Caring isn't weakness. It's what keeps us human." She met his gaze, her luminous eyes reflecting the faint glow of the console lights. "You different," she whispered. Your heart. Loud, he laughed quietly. Loud, huh? That's one word for it. She hesitated, then reached out, her cool fingers brushing the back of his hand. On Tyrus, she said, cold is good. Calm, you warm. He covered her hand with his own, feeling the faint tremor in her touch. Guess we balance each other out then. They sat like that for a moment, human heat and alien coolness mingling between them, while the wind outside whispered through the metal ruins. For the first time in years, Jared felt something like purpose. He'd spent so long running from everything that hurt, but now, with this fragile, luminous girl beside him, he found himself standing still, maybe even moving forward. Eventually, her eyes fluttered closed, exhaustion finally overtaking fear. Jared stayed awake, watching the slow rhythm of her breathing. Beyond the walls, lightning flashed on the horizon, revealing the faint silhouette of ships descending through the clouds, predators closing in on their prey. He didn't need Krell's scanners to know who they were. The Void Hounds had arrived, and the quiet, for all its comfort, had just ended. The first explosion ripped through the junk fields just before dawn, a pulse of white heat that shook the ground and rattled the walls of Krell's workshop. Jared jolted upright, instincts kicking in before thought could catch up. The air vibrated with the rising whine of engines small, fast, predatory. The Void Hounds were here. They came early, Krell growled, already moving toward his weapon rack. His four eyes blinked in rapid sequence as he tossed Jared a compact pulse rifle that had clearly seen better centuries. Safety's broken, don't overheat it, and try not to die. Jared checked the charge out of habit. You always this optimistic? Only when I like someone, Krell said, baring sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. The next blast struck closer, scattering debris across the entrance hatch. Tula stirred on her cot, eyes snapping open, body tense before she was even fully awake. Hunters, she whispered. Jared was already at her side, helping her to her feet. We have to move. Krell was typing furiously at his console, fingers flying over keys. I'm jamming their scanners for now, but it won't last. They're using military-grade spectrum tracking. Another explosion punctuated his words, closer this time. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Jared's heart hammered. Tell me you've got a plan. Of course I have a plan, Krell snapped. Unfortunately, it involves one of us staying behind. Jared froze. Tula's hand found his arm. No, she said, shaking her head violently. We go together. Krell turned, his lower eyes meeting hers while the upper pair focused on Jared. Listen to me, little heir. If they take you, the galaxy will never see your father's house fall. But if you survive, maybe there's a chance to end what they started. You're not dying for us, Jared said. Too late to argue, Krell muttered, yanking open a wall panel to reveal a tangle of explosives wired to a single handheld detonator. I've had this place rigged for years. Old habits die hard. Krell, go. The old alien barked, tossing Jared a data chip. Forged passage codes and coordinates for the freighter. Docks on the far side of the settlement. You'll need to move fast. I'll buy you time. The ceiling groaned as another shockwave hit. Jared grabbed his pack, slinging it over his shoulder. Tula's eyes shimmered with panic and refusal, but Krell's gaze softened, a rare flicker of affection crossing his scarred features. You remind me of my daughter, he said quietly. Stubborn as plasma fire. Don't waste that. Then he shoved them toward the tunnel hatch. Now move. Jared hesitated only a heartbeat before pulling Tula through. They slid down the narrow maintenance shaft, the metal cold and slick with condensation. Behind them, the muffled sound of weapons fire echoed, followed by the deep, rumbling roar of detonation. The shockwave hit like a physical blow, shoving dust through the tunnel and knocking Jared against the wall. Tula gasped, covering her ears. "He's gone," she whispered. "He knew what he was doing," Jared said, voice rough. "He bought us time. We don't waste it." They emerged into the skeletal remains of the old processing plant, sunlight bleeding through fractured panels in the ceiling. Smoke drifted through the gaps, curling around the corroded machinery like ghosts. Jared could see the landing pad through a broken wall less than a kilometer away. The supply freighter had already touched down, its cargo ramp extended. Hope flickered, brief and dangerous. Then movement caught his eye. A tall, thin figure detached itself from the shadows ahead, armor black as oil, eyes glowing with predatory light. A void hound. Jared pushed Tula behind him, raising his rifle. The mercenary tilted its head, voice an insectoid rasp. "You must be the human, the one who killed Varnes." Jared's pulse spiked. "Guess that makes me famous." "Briefly," the hound said. "Surrender the girl, and I'll make your death painless." "Yeah, see? That's the problem," Jared said, shifting his stance. "I'm not big on painless." The alien's mandibles flexed, a gesture of dark amusement. Primitive bravado. Predictable. "You'd be surprised," Jared muttered, then fired. The shot caught the hound across the chest, scorching armor, but not penetrating. The mercenary moved with impossible speed, crossing the space between them in a blink. Jared barely dodged the first blow, rolling under a clawed strike that split the air where his head had been. He fired again, the rifle whining as it overheated. The hound seized him by the collar, hurling him into a rusted pillar hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. Tula screamed his name, the sound cutting through the chaos like a blade. The hound turned toward her. "The air lives," it hissed. "Good. The bounty doubles if she's breathing." Jared forced himself up, ribs aching, vision swimming. He spotted a jagged pipe jutting from the floor, a relic of the facility's old coolant system. His mind flashed through Krell's lessons, the countless scrapes he'd survived on sheer audacity. "You know what humans are good at?" He gasped. The hound paused. "Dying?" "No," Jared said, gripping the pipe and lunging forward. "Improvising." He drove the pipe upward, straight into the gap between the hound's chest plates. The alien shrieked, staggering back as luminous fluid spilled across the floor. Jared twisted the pipe free and swung again, connecting with the creature's head. It dropped with a heavy thud. For a moment, only the sound of Jared's ragged breathing filled the air. Tula ran to him, her eyes wide with something between horror and awe. "You killed Void Hound," she whispered. "No one kills Void Hound." He tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. "Guess no one told me that." He wiped his mouth, tasting iron and ash. "Come on. We're not done yet." They sprinted across the open yard toward the freighter, smoke curling around them. In the distance, explosions still thundered from the direction of Krell's workshop, a final act of defiance, lighting up the poisoned sky. Each blast echoed the same truth Jared felt burning in his chest. The old mechanic had died so they could live. And now it was on him to make that sacrifice mean something. As the freighter's engines roared to life, Jared glanced at Tula beside him, her face streaked with grime and determination, her eyes fixed on the stars above. He tightened his grip on her hand, pulling her up the ramp as the ship began to lift. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving. He was fighting for something that mattered. The supply freighter tore through the orange smog of Nexus 7's upper atmosphere, leaving the junk planet shrinking into haze below. Jared sat against the bulkhead, muscles trembling from exhaustion, lungs still full of metal-tainted air. Across from him, Tula watched the view through the small window, her reflection pale and ghost-like against the burning clouds. The ship's engines vibrated under their feet, steady and alive, a heartbeat carrying them away from hell. For the first time since he'd found her buried beneath the debris, there was nothing chasing them. Just silence and the endless sky. Yet Jared couldn't feel relief. Krell's final explosion still echoed behind his eyelids, a flash of light and sacrifice. He'd only known the old mechanic for a few hours, but his loss burned deep, as if some part of Jared's rusted conscience had been reforged in that moment. Tula turned from the window, her silver hair catching the dim cabin light. "We go, where now?" she asked quietly. Jared pulled Krell's data chip from his pocket, running a thumb over its cracked edge. "Where this takes us. Garrick Station first. Then, maybe Tyrus Prime." The name lingered in the air like a spell. Tula's expression hardened not fear exactly, but the steady acceptance of someone facing something inevitable. "Home," she murmured. "Or what's left of it." When the freighter docked at Garrick Station, a massive ring of neon and shadow orbiting a dying moon, Jared's first breath of clean air in months felt like theft. The terminal was crowded with traders, smugglers, and soldiers, the stink of spice and coolant mixing with the sharp tongue of ozone. Tula stayed close, hood pulled up, her luminous skin hidden beneath a travel cloak Krell had packed for her. They moved through the crowd like ghosts, following the coordinates encoded in the chip. In a back corridor lit by failing holoads, they found a unit connected to the interstellar relay grid. Jared slid the chip into the port, praying it still worked. The screen flickered, displaying a sigil and ornate crown framed by silver wings. A moment later, a male voice answered in clipped, formal standard. "Identify." Tula stepped forward, lowering her hood. "Tula of House Valkyrian," she said, her accent sharp but certain. There was a long pause. Then the voice changed, softer, older, carrying both relief and disbelief. "My daughter." The image resolved into an aged Tyrusian patriarch seated in a high-backed chair, his cobalt skin dulled by illness, eyes bright as frost. Tula pressed a hand to her mouth, tears streaking down the grime on her cheeks. "Father," she whispered. Jared stepped back, feeling like an intruder at a sacred moment. But the old man's gaze shifted, fixing on him. "Human," he said, not unkindly. "You are the one who found her." Jared nodded, unsure what protocol existed for addressing alien royalty. "Just happened to be in the right place?" "No," the patriarch said. "You were in the place destiny chose." His voice weakened, a rattle beneath the grandeur. "Return to Tyrus Prime. There is much to mend and much to answer for." Then the screen went dark. The journey to Tyrus Prime felt longer than all the days Jared had spent in exile. The planet loomed ahead like a shard of crystal floating in black water, its cities glimmering under silver clouds. When their transport descended into the capital spire, Jared's breath caught. Everything was symmetrical, immaculate, cold. The air smelled of metal and rain. Soldiers in polished armor met them at the landing pad, escorting them through mirrored halls to a chamber lined with crystalline walls. There stood Commander Thelen, the Patriarch's envoy, his bearing regal and his voice smooth as cut glass. "Lady Tula," he said, bowing, "your father awaits. Your brothers are already in custody." Relief crossed her features, but only briefly. Jared followed as she was led through towering doors into a hall, filled with sterile light and the quiet hum of power. At the far end, the patriarch sat upon a dais, surrounded by silent attendants. His eyes, sharp even in illness, rested on his daughter first, and on Jared. "Come forward," he said. Tula knelt, head bowed. "Father, Enough," he interrupted gently. "You live. That is all that matters." But Jared saw something shift in Tula's expression, a flicker of suspicion, a question unspoken. "You knew," she said slowly. The hall went still. You knew what they planned. The patriarch's eyes did not waver. It was necessary. The Ascension Clause is a sacred test. Only the strongest should inherit. I did not expect you to survive, but you did and proved yourself worthy. The words landed like a blade between them. Tula's breath caught. You ordered them to bury me alive. To awaken you, her father said. And look what you became, a survivor, tempered by suffering. Jared took a step forward before he realized it, anger flaring hot. You call that a test? She was a child. The guards tensed, but the patriarch only studied him. Human emotion, he said coldly. Always so loud. Maybe, Jared shot back. But at least it's real. The old ruler turned his gaze to Tula again. You can despise me if you must, but take your place, lead our house, and end this cycle of weakness. Tula rose slowly, her expression calm, her voice trembling with quiet fury. You wanted to create strength, father, but all you created was fear. She reached up and unclasped the jeweled crest from her collar, letting it fall to the floor with a sound like shattering glass. If this is what it means to rule, then I refuse it. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then she turned, taking Jared's hand. We're done here. Guards moved, but Felon raised a hand to stop them. The patriarch's eyes soft, not with pride, but with something that looked almost like regret. Then go, he said. Perhaps you will build something stronger beyond my reach. Outside, the twin moons of Tyrus cast long pale shadows over the landing docks. The air smelled clean, untouched by rust or decay. Tula stood beside Jared, staring up at the stars. He will not change, she said. But I can? Jared nodded. Then that's enough. She looked at him, the faint reflection of starlight dancing in her eyes. You could stay, she said quietly. Be my voice among them. He smiled, small and tired. I think you've got a better one. They boarded the small courier ship Krell's codes had granted them, its engines humming softly beneath their feet. As it lifted from the marble platform, Jared glanced down at the gleaming towers below, the perfect, heartless beauty of a world built on silence, and felt no longing to return. Tula's hand found his, cool and certain. We begin again, she whispered. He squeezed gently. Yeah, he said, watching the stars spread open before them. From the Jungyard to the Crown. Guess the universe finally told a better joke. The ship climbed into the night, leaving Tyrus Prime, a fading shard of light behind them. Two exiles bound not by blood or destiny, but by choice, the girl, once buried by her own kind, and the human who refused to let her stay buried.